The council chamber of Nexus Prime hung in the darkness of space like a jewel, suspended in ink through its curved walls. 1,000 stars twinkled, silently indifferent to the fate of the small creatures that orbited them. Inside, the chamber was massive, designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes, from the crystalline structures of the ethereals to the towering forms of the void wraiths. Captain Marcus Chen stood in the center of the chamber, and his feet barely reached the middle point of the space. He was old, his hair silver, his back slightly bent from 70 years of living under the weight of a dying species. His uniform hung loosely on his thin frame, the insignia of the human fleet dulled by age and defeat. Around him, on seats that rose like the tiers of an ancient amphitheater, sat the judges of his people's fate. Commander Kale Vix of the Void Wraiths leaned forward in his seat, his exoskeleton clicking softly as he moved. His form was magnificent in a terrible way, all sharp angles and predatory grace, with eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. Behind those eyes lay centuries of conquest, of worlds consumed, of species brought to extinction. When he spoke, the other delegates listened. When he laughed, his laughter shook the very foundations of civilizations. And now, Kale Vix was laughing. The chittering sound filled the chamber, a noise like knives scraping across stone. Around him, the other delegates joined in. The crystalline minds, beings of pure mathematics and logic, somehow found humor in what they witnessed. The Zorvex collective, who had evolved on a world of eternal storm, clicked their approval. Even the ethereals, floating in their containment fields like ghostly wisps, seemed to shimmer with what could only be described as amusement. Marcus did not flinch. He stood perfectly still, his hands at his side, his face calm as still water. He had expected this reaction. He had been planning for it for the entire journey to Nexus Prime. You find something amusing? He asked, his voice steady and quiet. Around him, the laughter slowly died, not from respect but from curiosity. An old human, alone in the chamber, speaking to the most powerful beings in the known galaxy with the tone of a teacher addressing a classroom. Kalvik straightened in his seat, his many-jointed arms folding across his thorax. We find you amusing, human. We find your entire species amusing. You came to us 70 years ago thinking yourselves advanced, thinking yourselves ready to take your place among the stars. What a joke that proved to be. The other delegates murmured in agreement. It was true. When humanity's first fleet had ventured beyond their solar system, they had been greeted not with welcome but with overwhelming military force. The Void Wraiths had conquered humanity's 11 colonies in a matter of weeks. The human fleets, so impressive to their own eyes, had been reduced to ash and memory. You are predators, Marcus said, slowly, his eyes moving from one delegate to another. You were born to hunt, your bodies evolved to kill, your minds learned to conquer. For millions of years, you have been at the top of the food chain on your respective worlds. You look down upon us and see weakness. You see fragility. You see something small and easy to crush. Yes, Kalvix hissed, standing now. His height was impressive, nearly 3 times that of the human. We see exactly what you are. Prey. Nothing more. Marcus nodded slowly, as if this observation was obvious and expected. But that is where you. Wrong, Commander. That is where all of you are wrong. You are predators. It is true, but my people are not prey. We are something far more dangerous than either of us has realized. The chamber fell silent. Even Kalvik seemed taken aback by the strange certainty in the old human's voice. There was no fear in his tone, no desperation, no pleading. There was only facts stated as plainly as one might state the temperature of a star or the mathematical distance between two planets. You see, Marcus continued, predators are born from a world. They evolved to be the strongest, the fastest, the most vicious. Your power comes from dominance, from being at the top of the chain. This is what you understand. This is what your instincts tell you about the nature of power. He began to pace slowly across the chamber, his footsteps echoing softly. But humans come from a different kind of world. A world where we were not the fastest. We were not the strongest. We did not have claws or fangs or armor. We did not have venom or tremendous strength. For most of our history on Earth, we were surrounded by creatures that could kill us instantly if they chose to. Kalvix made a sound of dismissal. Then how did your species survive at all? Marcus smiled, and there was something in that smile that made even the ancient predator in the void wraith sense a warning he could not name. We learned to hunt them. We learned to think our way through problems that teeth could not solve. We learned persistence. We learned planning. We learned to work together to bring down creatures 100 times our mass. We learned that patience, combined with intelligence, could overcome any amount of physical strength. He stopped in the center of the chamber, his small frame somehow commanding the attention of beings vastly more powerful. You are predators. You rule through fear and strength and the raw knowledge that nothing can stand against you. But we are hunters, and hunters are something entirely different. Hunters understand their prey. Hunters plan. Hunters wait. Hunters are patient in ways that predators can never be. The crystalline mind seemed to pulse with sudden light, as if processing the implications of what they were hearing. Even the ethereals grew still, their ethereal forms ceasing their constant, ghostly movement. This is why I have come here, Marcus said, his voice becoming quieter, more intense, not to beg for mercy, not to plead for your compassion. I have come to tell you something that you must understand. If you wish to survive what is coming, you may be predators. You may be the most powerful force this galaxy has ever known, but you are not hunters, and that difference is going to matter more than anything else. Kelthas leaned back in his seat, his exoskeleton clicking thoughtfully. You stand before us, outnumbered and defeated, and speak of threats. This is either the courage of a fool or the confidence of someone who knows something we do not. Which is it, old human? Marcus met his gaze directly. It is neither and both, Commander. I am simply telling you the truth. You conquered my people because you are stronger, but you did not understand us. You did not understand what it means to be hunted by creatures who are patient, who are intelligent, and who have nothing left to lose. That will be your mistake. Enough. The crystalline mind spoke, its voice like the singing of crystal. Unless this human has something more to offer than riddles and philosophical musings, this audience is at an end. The vote will proceed. Humanity will be given 2 weeks to integrate fully into void wraith society or be eliminated. Marcus nodded as if he had expected nothing less as he turned to leave the chamber. He spoke once more, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "The clock has started then. Let us see who is the better hunter." As the old human walked from the chamber, Kelvix remained standing long after the others had returned to their deliberations. Something in the human's words had stirred something ancient within him, something his predators' mind could not quite name. For the first time in his long and terrible life, the great hunter felt the faintest shadow of doubt, but doubt, he told himself, was a weakness, and the void wraiths did not suffer weakness. 2 days later, everything changed. The military strategists of the Confederacy sat in the strategy chamber beneath the council room, their collective minds working through the data that had begun to pour in from across human space. What they were finding made no sense at first. Then, slowly, a pattern emerged. A terrible, undeniable pattern. Human mining operations in the outer asteroids, not random placements, but a careful perimeter. Trade routes that seemed to follow natural corridors, but actually formed a network of strategic choke points. Supply caches found on worlds that humans had been permitted to settle. Research stations hidden in nebulae. Communication arrays disguised as scientific equipment, and beneath it all, the most disturbing discovery: humans had infiltrated void wraith command structures, not as soldiers or spies, but as advisors, engineers, analysts, individuals in positions of subtle influence that had been gradually building for decades. Speaker of patterns, the crystalline mind mathematician, made the realization that sent shockwaves through the Confederacy. She processed the data one final time, her crystalline form pulsing with urgent light. "They have been hunting us," she said simply. "Not with weapons, not with force, but with time, with patience, with information." The human captain did not come to surrender. He came to deliver a message. And we laughed at him because we did not understand what message was being delivered. In that moment, the hunters showed their teeth, and the predators finally understood what it meant to be prey. The laboratories and war rooms of the void wraiths operated at a fever pitch for the first time in 1,000 years. Commander Kelvix had ordered every available mind to analyze the human threat. They could not afford to ignore the warning that had been delivered so calmly in the council chamber. What they discovered was worse than any military invasion. It was the slow, methodical dismantling of their entire civilization by an enemy they had not even recognized as an enemy until it was far too late to stop what was coming. The first shock came from the analysis of human communication records. The void wraiths had always permitted human radio and quantum transmissions, seeing them as the harmless chatter of a conquered and broken species. But when the communications team began looking deeper, they found codes within codes, messages hidden beneath official broadcasts, information flowing between human settlements in patterns that were too organized to be random. Humans had been talking to each other, planning with each other, building something together in the shadow of their conquerors. Next came the discovery of the supply caches. On a barren moon orbiting a forgotten planet, a team of void wraith soldiers found a storage facility containing advanced weapons, human weapons, but constructed using materials that could only have been stolen from wraith foundries. The weapons were old, some of them Decades old, but they were in perfect working condition. Preserved. Waiting, then another cache was found. And another scattered across human space like seeds, each one a small arsenal positioned in a location that the Wraith's military strategists now realized formed a strategic web. If humans were to move against the void Wraiths, they would have supply lines and defensive positions already in place. They had not been hiding these supplies, they had been positioning them. Commander Kael'Vix watched the reports come in with growing unease. The military mind of the Void Wraiths was sharp and cunning, evolved through 1,000 years of conquest, but even the greatest hunter can be caught off guard by prey that has learned to think like a predator. The most disturbing finding came from the intelligence division. They had discovered that humans occupied positions of influence throughout the Void Wraith command structure. A human engineer named David Torres had been working in the primary defensive systems of the Wraith flagship for over 30 years. A human analyst named Sarah Chen had been providing tactical recommendations to Kael'Vix's own strategist for 2 decades. A human named James Park had been managing supply routes and logistics for the entire military supply chain. They were not soldiers, they had not been placed there through force, they had been hired, trained, and trusted. They had become so integrated into the machine of the Void Wraith military that their presence seemed completely natural. And in all that time they had been learning how the Wraiths thought, learning their strategies, learning their weaknesses. When the interrogation teams brought David Torres before Commander Kael'Vix, the engineer did not try to hide or deny what he had done. He simply sat calmly and explained it with the same patient certainty that Captain Marcus Chen had used in the council chamber. You conquered us with your strength, Torres said, his voice quiet but clear. That was inevitable. You are stronger than us, faster than us, better adapted to combat than us. We could never beat you in a war of power. So we did not try. Then what did you try? Kael'Vix demanded, his exoskeleton trembling with the effort of controlling his rage. We tried to understand you, Torvin replied. For 70 years we have lived among you, worked for you, served you, and in serving you we learned everything there is to know about how you think. We learned your psychology. We learned your strengths and your weaknesses. We learned how you make decisions and how you react to threats. We mapped every system, every command structure, every dependency in your entire civilization. The interrogation sessions revealed that hundreds of humans had been positioned in similar roles throughout Void Wraith society. Scientists in research facilities, engineers in manufacturing plants, administrators in government offices, doctors in medical centers, each one a small intelligence agent gathering information and sending it back through hidden networks to the unified human command. Kael'Vix understood with a clarity that was almost painful what Marcus Chen had been trying to tell them. Humans were not trying to build a military force to challenge the Wraiths. They were building something far more subtle and far more dangerous. They were building complete knowledge of their enemies. They were becoming hunters. Speaker of patterns made the final connection that tied everything together. The crystalline mind mathematician had been analyzing the positions of all the discovered supply caches, the locations of hidden research stations and the placement of communication arrays. She had input all this information into her mathematical models, looking for the pattern beneath the chaos. When she found it, her crystalline form pulsed with colors that signaled deep alarm. The caches are positioned to create a defensive network, she explained to the assembled leadership, but they are also positioned in a way that would allow human forces to control key choke points in Void Wraith territory. The communication arrays are designed to interfere with our own communication systems if activated. The research stations are positioned to provide shelter in locations that we cannot easily reach. It is not a network of resources, it is a strategic framework for an entire military campaign, but they have no military to speak of, protested a junior strategist. Their fleet was destroyed 70 years ago. That is because their fleet was never their strategy. Speaker of patterns said, look again at what they have been building. They have not been building a military force. They have been building the infrastructure to support one. When that force arrives, it will not be unprepared, it will not be lost or confused, it will know exactly where to go, what resources are available, and how to move through our territory with maximum efficiency. The Void Wraiths looked at each other with growing horror. The humans had been planning this for 70 years, since the moment of their defeat. They had been positioning themselves for a war that they now understood they could not avoid. They had infiltrated the very heart of Void Wraith civilization and learned everything they needed to know. Commander Kalvix returned to the council chamber and faced Speaker of Patterns directly. How long do we have? He asked quietly. The crystalline mind's response came without hesitation, each word carrying the weight of mathematical certainty. The infrastructure is complete. The positions are in place. The humans have finished their preparation phase. They now have only to activate their strategy. By our estimates, they could begin their assault within days, perhaps only hours. Kalvix closed his eyes and thought of the old human in the council chamber, speaking with such calm certainty about hunters and prey. He had not come to beg for mercy, he had come to deliver a message, knowing that they would eventually understand it, knowing that they would eventually realize the truth. They had not conquered a species. They had merely given a highly intelligent predator the time and freedom to learn how to hunt them. And as the Void Wraiths began to realize the scope of their miscalculation, human fleets began to move through the darkness of space, not with violence yet, not with aggression, but with the patient certainty of hunters who had already calculated every move their prey would make. The game was beginning, and the predators would soon discover what it meant to face hunters who had been planning their strategy for 7 decades. The attack did not come as a terrible explosion across the sky. It did not announce itself with massive weapons or overwhelming force. Instead, it came quietly, like a shadow spreading across the face of the moon. It came through the systems that the Void Wraiths had trusted for thousands of years. In the main communication hub of the Void Wraith flagship, the first sign of trouble came when David Torres simply walked to the main control panel and entered a code. The code was real. He had been given the authorization to use it, but what it did was not what the Void Wraiths had ever intended. It opened a back door into their entire communication network, And behind that back door came the full weight of human intelligence and planning. Within minutes, the flagship's communication systems went dark. Not destroyed, not broken, but sealed. The commanders could not contact their fleets. The fleets could not contact each other. In the darkness of space, the Void Wraith military found itself fractured into isolated pieces, unable to coordinate or communicate. And that was only the beginning. Sarah Chen, the human analyst who had worked for Commander Kale Vix for 20 years, had memorized every supply route, every logistics chain, every mechanism by which resources flowed through the Void Wraith military. When she activated the protocols that humans had been preparing for 70 years, those supply lines simply ceased to exist, not through destruction but through interruption. Human vessels moved into position at key choke points and simply closed the routes. Supplies could not reach the fleets. Fleets could not resupply. Within days, the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known would begin to starve. On 100 worlds where humans had been permitted to live, they rose up with purpose and precision. They were not trying to conquer anything. They were simply securing the resources and positions that they had spent decades preparing. They moved with the confidence of beings who knew exactly what they were doing, where they needed to be, and how to achieve their objectives. Commander Kale Vix watched from his isolated flagship as his entire civilization began to unravel, not from a frontal assault, but from within. The humans had not attacked him. They had not invaded his worlds or challenged his power directly. They had simply revealed that they had been inside his systems all along, pulling small threads here and there, until the entire structure began to collapse. He made one final attempt to understand what was happening. He tried to contact the human command structure directly. A face appeared on his screen. Captain Marcus Chen, the old human who had stood so calmly in the council chamber and delivered a warning that Kale Vix had been too proud to heed. "You do this without honor," Kale Vix said, his voice barely controlled. "You attack from the shadows. You betray the trust we gave you." Marcus looked at him with eyes that held no cruelty, no triumph, no emotion at all. There was only the cold clarity of a being who understood his enemy completely and was acting with perfect precision. "You gave us no trust, Commander. You gave us permission. You allowed us to live within your civilization because you thought us harmless. That was your mistake. A hunter does not announce his presence. A hunter does not attack until he has already won the battle through preparation and understanding." Kale Vix leaned forward. "How long have you been planning this?" 70 years, Marcus replied simply. "The moment your ships destroyed our fleets and conquered our colonies, we knew that we could not defeat you. Through warfare, you are stronger, faster, more vicious than us. We could never match you in direct combat. So instead, we chose a different path. We sent our people among you. We had them become your engineers, your analysts, your advisors, and for 70 years they learned everything about you." The Void Wraith commander felt something he had never experienced before. It was not pain or fear in the traditional sense. It was something worse. It was the knowledge that he had been outmaneuvered by a being who had been playing a game with stakes that he had not even recognized. "If you are so superior, why Not simply destroy us. Kael'vix asked. Marcus's expression did not change. Because we are not conquerors. Commander, we are not like you. We do not seek dominance through terror or annihilation. We seek survival through understanding. The Void Wraiths will survive this conflict. You will be diminished, yes. Your power will be reduced, yes, but you will be allowed to live, to rebuild, and to remember what it means to underestimate an enemy. Throughout the galaxy, the pattern repeated itself. Human agents activated hidden networks and systems. Supply lines were cut. Communication systems were seized from within. Command structures fragmented as key leaders found themselves isolated and unable to coordinate. The Void Wraiths had not been invaded or attacked in the traditional sense. They had been surgically dismantled by an enemy they could not see or fight, because that enemy was already inside their own systems. But what made it truly brilliant was that no human killed anyone. There were no massacres, no atrocities, no terrible acts of revenge. There was simply the cold, efficient disruption of systems. Humans did not try to conquer Void Wraith worlds. They simply took control of strategic locations and resources. They did not try to destroy Void Wraith fleets. They simply made those fleets unable to operate. It was not cruelty, it was efficiency. It was the mark of a species that had evolved to hunt prey larger and stronger than themselves. They knew that overwhelming force was not necessary. What was necessary was understanding, planning, and the willingness to move with patience and precision. Some Void Wraith military leaders tried to fight back violently. They attempted to regain their communication systems through force. But by then, it was too late. The humans controlled the systems from so many different angles, through so many different layers of technology and protocol, that removing them would require destroying the systems themselves, which meant destroying the very infrastructure that the Void Wraiths needed to survive. By the end of the first month, the Void Wraith civilization had transformed from a unified conquering force into a fragmented collection of isolated communities. Commander Kael'vix found himself leading only a handful of ships, cut off from the rest of his kind, unable to coordinate or attack effectively, and through it all humans moved with the certainty of hunters who had been planning this moment for 70 years. They had known exactly what would happen. They had predicted Kael'vix's moves before he made them. They had understood the weakness in every system before they ever allowed themselves to be conquered, because that was what it had been. Kael'vix realized with bitter clarity. Not a conquest, not a defeat. It had been a hunt, a masterfully planned, executed with perfect timing. A hunt that had taken 70 years to set up and only weeks to complete. Marcus appeared on his screen one final time. The war is over, Commander. You may choose to surrender and be treated with dignity, or you may choose to continue. But the outcome will be the same. We have already won. We have been winning since the moment you conquered us 70 years ago. You simply did not understand it until now, and in that moment Kael'vix understood something fundamental about his species and about humanity. The Void Wraiths were predators. They ruled through strength and fear. But humans were hunters, and hunters, he now realized with terrible clarity, were far more dangerous than any predator the universe had ever created. 1 year had passed since the last transmission from Commander Kale Vix. In that time, the void wraiths had scattered across the galaxy, no longer a unified force but a broken people trying to rebuild what they had lost. Some fled to the edges of known space. Others submitted to the new order that humans had begun to establish. Still others simply withdrew into themselves, unable to comprehend what had happened. The Celestial Accord Council chamber was full once again, but the air had changed completely. Where there had once been laughter and contempt, there was now a careful silence. The beings that sat in the high seats were no longer certain of their own supremacy. They had all watched as humans took apart the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. Not through overwhelming force, but through patience, intelligence, and preparation. Captain Marcus Chen stood in the center of the chamber once more. But this time he did not stand alone. Behind him stood representatives from a dozen human worlds, all of them young, all of them confident, all of them carrying the weight of having accomplished something that the entire galaxy had thought impossible. The old captain was older now, his health failing, but his mind was as sharp as it had ever been. He looked up at the council with the same calm expression he had worn a year ago in this very chamber. We do not seek vengeance, Marcus said, his voice steady despite his age. Vengeance is the tool of those who feel powerless, who strike out in anger and pain. We are not powerless. We have never been powerless. And that is why we will not use vengeance as a tool. Speaker of patterns pulsed with curious light. Then what do you seek, human? Wisdom. Marcus replied simply. The Confederacy was meant to be a partnership of minds, not a hierarchy of fangs. For too long the strongest species have dominated the weaker ones through force and fear. This will change, not because we wish to dominate you in turn, but because we understand something that you have only just begun to learn. True power comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the ability to understand. Over the next months and years, humanity began to establish itself as a major force in galactic politics. But they did not do this through conquest or the threat of military force. Instead, they became advisors, strategists, and architects of the new order. Species that had once been oppressed by the void wraiths began to look to humans for guidance on how to build their own defense systems, how to prepare their own strategies, how to ensure that they would never again be helpless before a more powerful enemy. The Zorvex Collective sent ambassadors to learn from human military strategists. The Ethereals requested human assistance in understanding long-term planning and resource allocation. Even the crystalline minds, whose mathematical understanding exceeded that of any other species, found value in the human approach to strategy and preparation. What humans taught was not the art of warfare, it was the art of hunting. The ability to understand your enemy completely. The willingness to think many moves ahead, the patience to prepare for years or decades if necessary. The understanding that true victory comes not from the moment of battle, but from all the moments of preparation that came before it. Young humans from worlds across the galaxy began to teach these principles to younger species that had formerly been oppressed on a training station orbiting a binary star system. human military instructors worked with, representatives from species that the Void Wraiths had once conquered, teaching them not how to fight like predators but how to hunt like humans. The curriculum was simple in concept, but profound in execution. First, students learned to observe, to watch their enemies, to understand not just their physical capabilities, but their psychology, their thinking patterns, their strengths and weaknesses. Second, they learned to plan not just for the coming battle, but for all the battles that might come after it. Resources had to be positioned, supply lines had to be secured, communication networks had to be redundant and reliable. Third, they learned patience. The greatest hunts took years or decades to complete. Rushing led to failure. Preparation led to victory, and beneath it all was a philosophy that humans seemed to understand in a way that other species could not. Power was not about being the strongest. Power was about being the most prepared, the most intelligent, and the most willing to think many steps ahead of your enemy. Years passed. Marcus Chen grew older still until finally he retired from his position as humanity's chief strategist. A new generation of human leaders took over, beings born after the war with the Void Wraiths who understood this new galactic order as the natural state of things. To them, the idea that humans had once been considered prey was almost incomprehensible. But Marcus was not ready to disappear completely. He spent his final years observing the changes that his people had set in motion. He watched as younger species, once oppressed and afraid, began to stand with confidence beside the great powers of the galaxy. He watched as the Void Wraiths slowly rebuilt themselves, learning that they could exist as a smaller power without ceasing to be respected. In his final days, as his body finally began to fail, Marcus received a visitor. It was Commander Kale Vix himself, now in exile from his own kind but not a captive. The great Void Wraith warrior had sought out the old human on a station orbiting the planet where the first treaty between humans and Void Wraiths had been signed. They sat together in silence for a long moment, the predator and the hunter, two beings who had played a game of strategy and intelligence that had transformed the entire galaxy. I still do not fully understand, Kale Vix said. Finally, his exoskeleton ancient and weathered now. We were stronger, we were faster. We had every advantage. How did you know that you would win? Marcus smiled, the expression of an old man looking back on a long life well lived. We did not know we would win, Commander. We only knew that if we studied you, learned you, understood you as completely as a hunter understands their prey, then winning became inevitable. It was not hope, it was mathematics. It was preparation, it was the understanding that 5 years of work can defeat 1,000 years of physical strength. Kalen Vix was silent for a long moment. If you had destroyed us, instead of simply defeating us, would that have been wrong? Perhaps not wrong, Marcus acknowledged, but it would have been unnecessary. We are hunters, Commander, not conquerors. We hunt to survive, but survival does not require destruction. It requires understanding, and once you understand an enemy completely, you can do with them whatever you choose. We chose to allow you to live and learn. The Void Wraith Commander rose slowly, his massive form moving with the care of aid. Then you are wiser than I ever gave you credit for. It is a wisdom I will carry back to my people. Perhaps in time they will learn to respect it. After Kale and Vix departed, Marcus returned to his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights were the worlds of 100 different species. Some of them were still learning to be hunters, others were still struggling with the knowledge that true power came not from physical strength but from preparation and understanding. And all of them in their own way were beginning to understand what humans had always known. The universe was not a place that belonged to the strongest. It belonged to the patient. It belonged to those willing to think many moves ahead. It belonged to those who understood that the greatest victories were won long before the first battle began. Marcus closed his eyes, and of all those 70 years of his people living under the rule of the void wraiths, all the while gathering knowledge, positioning resources, waiting for the moment when their preparation could be transformed into victory. It had taken his entire life, but humanity had done what no one thought possible. They had not conquered a predator through strength, they had hunted them through intelligence, and in doing so they had proven something fundamental about the universe and about the species that inhabited it. The most dangerous creature in the cosmos was not the one with the sharpest teeth or the greatest strength. It was the one with the longest memory, the deepest patience, and the most cunning mind. As Marcus Chin's eyes closed for the final time, the universe continued its eternal spin. Humanity's influence spread like a quiet tide across the stars, not through conquest or force, but through the simple understanding that had always defined them. They were hunters, and hunters, given time and freedom to prepare, could overcome anything.